They called Earth a primitive data archive. Not out loud, of course. Galactic decorum demanded euphemism. But every transcript, every polished interstellar memo from the Data Dominion Council labeled Earth with the same condescending precision one might assign a mildly radioactive museum. Historically rich, tactically irrelevant, psychologically immature. By their reckoning, humanity had peaked centuries ago, flaring like a minor nova of conflict and contradiction, then settled into an odd observational quiet. No interstellar colonies, no wormhole diplomacy, just silence. And that made them curious. Not fearful, curious. So they sent an envoy to Earth, a velvet-limbed diplomat from the Valari caste, bred for negotiation and aesthetic judgment. Her skin glistened like polished glass. Her dialect hovered somewhere between song and scent. She brought 12 assistants, a bio-sealed gift of nutrient pearls, and a treaty designed to subjugate, politely. She was never seen again. That should have been the first red flag. But instead, the Empire dispatched a second team, this time with military escort. They too vanished, though their last transmission, a 0.7-second burst of corrupted visuals, revealed a human man sitting on a folding chair in what looked like a public park. He was reading Sun Tzu aloud. Behind him, cherry blossoms fell in slow, dreamlike spirals. No weapon, no threat, just him. They laughed. A full meeting of the Imperial High Archive was convened in orbit above Narek to discuss the anomaly. 36 delegates, 84 advisors, 2 full linguists from the Adraxian node who specialized in species with aggressive mythopoetic trauma. They replayed Earth's history, again, and again, and again. The humans, they said, were obsessed with conflict. Their early development was shaped by blood, nomadic raids, siege warfare, empire and rebellion, slavery, liberation, over and over, until the 20th century, where death industrialized itself. The Valari ambassador chuckled, her voice like a string instrument being plucked in a vacuum. They bombed themselves, she said, flicking a crystal talon across the screen. Twice. For clarity. The council joined her. The humans had named the devices Little Boy and Fat Man. Even their weapons had the casual humor of the damned. The consensus was unanimous, containable, possibly instructive. A controlled delegation was planned. That was when he arrived. He walked off the landing pad without announcement. No weapons, no security detail. A single gray suit, a leather briefcase, and a gait that suggested neither rush nor hesitation. They scanned him 3 times. Biometrics returned standard readings. Heart rate, 58. Blood pressure, borderline low. No implants. No foreign tech. No facial twitch of aggression. He simply raised a hand in greeting and said, "Apologies for the delay. I was waiting for an invitation that never came." Security requested his name. He smiled faintly. Does it matter? It did. But no one wanted to admit that. They escorted him to a containment lounge, polite walls, soft lighting, ambient scent of rain. Surveillance flooded the room through invisible apertures. He took a seat, crossed his legs, opened his briefcase. Inside, a thermos of tea, a faded paperback copy of The Art of War, and a photo, creased and yellowed, of a woman holding a child beside a tank. "I suppose you'd like a presentation," he said, pouring tea. "Something neat, digestible." The High Chancellor responded through visual relay. A being of immense mass, encoded light pulses, and vocal modulation that translated poorly into any human tongue. The best approximation. "You represent Earth?" The man didn't flinch. "I represent the cost of misunderstanding it." A pause. Slight, but registered. "You are here to accept terms?" "I'm here to offer clarity." The council exchanged glances, tentacles, pheromones. The Threxian emissary, whose species viewed eye contact as threat, hissed an octave too high. "Your species is feral. You consumed each other. Why should we negotiate?" The human turned a page in his book. "We never fought to win," he said. "We fought because forgetting was worse." No one knew what that meant. A panel of military advisors queued up archived footage of Earth's major conflicts, black and white reels, digital reconstructions, infrared overlays. They showed World War I trenches, World War II blitzes, napalm trails over jungles, drone strikes in desert compounds, domestic uprisings, school shootings, mushroom clouds. The room smelled faintly of ozone. The Valari leaned forward, smug. "You set fire to your own world," repeatedly. "Yes," the man said. "And we learned how to live in the smoke." Silence. One of the Adraxian linguists asked, delicately, if humanity had advanced past such trauma. The human replied, "We didn't advance past it. We wove it in." Another silence. He took a sip of tea. The Valari scoffed. "This is performance. Nothing more. Your species crawled through its own blood and called it progress. Now you linger on the edge of relevance, like a parasite waiting to be reabsorbed." The human's eyes flicked toward her. Not cold, not hostile, just quiet. "We crawled because we were buried," he said. "But we remembered the way up." Security bristled. Not at his words, but his calm. One of the ceiling projectors pinged. Earth's signal records had changed again. New patterns. Not random. Not propaganda. History. The council began to realize Earth wasn't hiding. It was offering access. Too late. By then, the man had stood and stepped forward. The walls did not bar him. The guards hesitated. The protocols scrambled. He placed the photograph on the central table. "This was my grandmother," he said. "She watched 3 sons die on different continents for countries that buried their names. She grew tomatoes, played chess, smoked filterless cigarettes. When they dropped the bombs, she said, 'At least now they'll listen.'" The Valari hissed, "You glorify death." He looked at her with something almost like pity. "No. We understand its price." The Threxian war tactician, who had once seen planetary purges as child's play, scoffed. "You built nations on guilt." "No," the human said. "We built graves on guilt. Nations grew from what haunted them." The room shifted. They began to understand that this man had no military rank, no genetic enhancements, no cybernetic core. He was not an emissary. He was evidence. The human tapped the table. A final image appeared, not a war zone, not a battlefield, just a library, half-burned, shelves collapsed, ash snowing through a broken roof. "The archive," he said softly, "isn't what we stored. It's what we survived." He looked around at them. These creatures of steel, light, logic, and lineage. "You asked why Earth went silent," he said. "It wasn't surrender. It was observation." A low pulse ran through the chamber. One of the younger analysts whispered, "He's not the first." The man's smile never reached his eyes. "We've been walking into rooms like this for years. Quietly, patiently, leaving pieces of our history where they'd be most contagious." The Valari turned pale, literally. Her skin rippled, then dulled. "Is this a threat?" "No," the human said. "This is a reading assignment." Then he nodded toward the ceiling, where Earth's broadcast continued. Footage from Sarajevo, Aleppo, the Somme, My Lai, Baghdad. Not sanitized. Not explained. Just shown. The council watched. No music. No narration. Just the raw howl of history in its ugliest form. When the screen finally went black, no one spoke for several seconds. Then the human turned, collected his book, and walked toward the exit. At the door he paused. "Most of your empires were built on systems," he said. "Ours was built on sorrow. You can crack a system. Sorrow stays." With that he left. The guards did not follow. And in the quiet that remained, the council understood, too late, that they hadn't summoned a diplomat. They'd summoned a ghost. And Earth? It hadn't disappeared. It had simply stopped asking permission. There was a room called the Silence Array. It sat 5 floors beneath the Dominion Archive, cooled by helium pumps and shielded by carbonized obsidian. It was where the Empire stored records too unstable to analyze in open systems, files that had corrupted AI observers, ruptured psychic relay nets, or triggered anomalies in pattern recognition cores. Earth's data was now in the Silence Array. The transfer had been cautious. 8 containment firewalls. 12 xenolinguistic decryptions. A team of 12 Adraxian pattern scholars and 2 war-hardened Threxian tacticians were present to review the files. They considered themselves prepared. The human hadn't been invited. He arrived anyway, hands folded behind his back, still wearing the same unwrinkled suit and faint smile. They let him in. No one remembered giving permission. The lead tactician, a pale blue Threxian with war medals carved directly into his exoskeleton, scoffed as the human approached. "This is a military-grade review zone. Are you lost, Archivist?" "No," the human replied. "But you might be." He was handed a sealed headset and a viewing console. The screens in the room pulsed to life, projecting the Earth sequence that the Dominion deemed most indicative of tactical absurdity. The Eastern Front. The title alone made the Volari historian flinch. "I thought your species categorized that conflict as suicidal," one of the analysts offered. "We did," said the human. "That doesn't mean it failed." The simulation began. At first, it was only numbers, casualty charts, deployment stats, topographic time-lapse. The analysts relaxed. It was grotesque but comprehensible. One Adraxian made a snide comment about thermodynamic inefficiency in Soviet tank formations. Then came the footage. Grainy, black and white hellscapes. Men marching in snow, their boots dissolving into pulp. Trenches dug into frozen ground with bare hands. Entire divisions vanishing into forests only to reappear weeks later, screaming. The simulation did not pause. It shifted. The siege of Leningrad. 3 years of starvation and artillery and opera. Mothers cooking wallpaper glue. Children attending piano recitals in bombed-out theaters. Civilians refusing to die until the enemy did first. The room grew cold. The Threxians' mandibles twitched. "These aren't soldiers. They're animals." "No," the human said softly. "They were citizens. That's worse." Another shift. Stalingrad. An urban maze of glass and bone. House-to-house fighting, so close the muzzle flashes ignited enemy uniforms. The simulation zoomed in on a single street, Pavlov's house. 40 men held it for 2 months. They wired doors with piano wire and filled bathtubs with grenades. The alien room fell quiet. "You didn't win this war," said a Volari. "You just outlasted the horror." The human nodded. "That's what made a human." He paused the feed. "Tell me," he asked, "have you ever buried someone in snow because the ground was too hard to dig?" The room did not answer. "You think endurance is inefficient," he said. "We think it's the only metric that matters." One of the Adraxians leaned forward, his voice soft. "Why show us this?" The human replied, "Because you think war is about force. We think it's about cost." The simulation resumed. But this time, something changed. The screen began echoing human voices. Not commands. Not battle cries. Whispers. Letters from mothers. Prayers from soldiers. Lullabies hummed in foxholes. A man reciting Pushkin while bleeding out on frost. The Empire's AI systems began to falter. Translation threads tangled. Emotional coding scrambled. One of the interpreters gasped and began to speak in Russian, his own voice distorted into a child's wail. Security attempted to shut the simulation down, but the command interface locked. It had fused. "You shouldn't have tried to understand this," the human said quietly. "You should have just respected the fact that we did it." The Volari trembled. "This is psychological warfare." "No," the human said. "This is memory." The temperature in the room dropped again. Not physically, but something in the core light dimmed. One of the Threxians collapsed, claws twitching, eyes wide. When revived, he whispered only one thing. "They made it snow red." The human stood and approached the console. On screen, a Soviet soldier smiled with one gold tooth, loading a rifle, with shaking hands, blood freezing on his eyelashes. This man, the human said, was 19. He watched his brother burn to death in a fuel truck. He still held the line. "We don't remember his name, but he remembered ours." The simulation now showed torchlit columns of human soldiers marching silently through forests. Snow fell like judgment. No fanfare. No anthem. Just the sound of boots. Thousands of boots. The Volari choked. This isn't war. This is mythology. The human's eyes narrowed. That's why you're losing. A tremor rippled through the station. Not physical. Emotional. The AI interface had begun echoing human breath patterns. Several analysts' pupils dilated abnormally. Their bodies tried to mimic hypothermia, despite ambient warmth. The human walked to the center of the room. "You asked why we stopped fighting," he said. "But we never did." He turned off the simulation, and in the silence that followed, he pulled something from his pocket. A small, worn medal. Bronze. Faint inscription. "For courage." My grandfather never spoke of what he did, but when he died, he gripped this so tightly, we had to break his fingers to remove it. The aliens looked at it like it was a weapon. It was. Because they finally realized, it wasn't just that Earth had fought longer or bloodier. It was that Earth recorded it, cherished it, passed it down, not as shame, but as sacrament. "You turned death into art," the Adraxian murmured. "No," the human replied. "We turned survival into ritual." One of the AI cores attempted to reprocess the simulation for archival storage. It immediately suffered a recursive collapse. Code looped. Error messages stacked into fractals. The human watched. "Your minds weren't made for this. Ours were forged by it." The Volari ambassador stood, unsteady. "You came here to boast." "No," he said. "I came here to warn." A soft alarm pinged. Not dangerous, just a signal. Earth had uploaded a new data stream. This one wasn't war footage. It was music. Shostakovich. Symphony No. 7. Composed during the siege. Performed while bombs fell outside the concert hall. Musicians played with frostbitten hands. Some had to be replaced mid-performance because they died between movements. The human closed his eyes as the first notes began. And, as the music played, the aliens finally understood. It wasn't brutality that made humans dangerous. It was meaning. The chorus swelled. The human opened his eyes. "You wage war to win," he said. "We waged it so no one would ever forget who we were." And in that moment, the silence array began to shut itself down. Not from failure, from refusal. Even the machines knew. Some memories weren't meant to be stored. The Volari slumped in her chair, drained of pigment. "This is only one war. One front," the human corrected. "One of many." A pause. Then he added, "And we lost more than we won. Then why preserve it?" His voice was almost tender. "Because losing doesn't mean surrender. It means someone had to remember." The alarm lights dimmed. The door hissed open. The human walked out, his medal still warm in his hand. Behind him, the council sat silent. A species of warless civilizations now haunted by one truth. The humans never needed a weapon. They were one. No one remembered when he left the silence array. Only that afterward, the temperature on the station never quite normalized. Doors hissed slower. Surveillance feeds acquired a faint static hum, like breath caught between words. A few crew members whispered of shared dreams, of snow and fire, of boots on broken glass. The human never mentioned the Eastern Front again. He walked the station freely now. Protocol was unclear. No one had officially granted him diplomatic clearance, yet no one revoked it either. Every authority assumed someone else had signed the forms. He wandered into observation domes, cafeterias, and AI maintenance chambers like he belonged. He never asked questions. He only watched. And when he watched, systems glitched. Small things. Code anomalies. Temporal feedback. At first, attributed to solar interference. Then to minor gravitational distortions. But someone finally checked. The disruptions weren't random. They mirrored human war timelines. Each burst of data error aligned, to the hour, with some earthly atrocity. Dresden, Nanking, Rwanda, Fallujah. The station's AI called it coincidence. The human called it gravity. He sat in the simulator hall that third evening, though night and day were meaningless here. A cavernous space designed to test planetary terrains, battle scenarios, and psychological responses. There were no other humans to simulate. But he didn't ask for any. He walked into the middle of the floor, removed his shoes, and sat cross-legged, jacket folded beside him like a relic. Then he spoke. "I'd like to run something," he said to the AI core. "A scenario we haven't tried. Specify simulation parameters." The system responded. He smiled slightly. Earth. Unfiltered. 1939 to 2035. Full immersion. Emotional sync. Authorized. There was a pause. Then the lights dimmed. Above him, the dome ceiling flickered alive with stars. Not maps, memories. Constellations twisted into fire trails. Countries burned like signal flares. Whole cities blinked in and out of existence. The simulation didn't show battles. It showed impact. He stood slowly, not hurried, not dramatic, just like someone who'd been waiting to stretch his legs. And then he removed his jacket. The cameras caught it, frame by frame. No weapons underneath. No armor. Just a shirt, faintly bloodstained. A pale scar across one shoulder, old and jagged. Another, thin and silvery, curled behind his ear and disappeared into his hairline. Someone watching whispered, "He's marked." The fabric fell to the ground, silent as ash. On his left arm, a tattoo. A barcode crossed out by a knife. Not stylized. Not symbolic. It looked real. "Begin," he said. The simulation triggered. Not for him, for everyone. Every screen on the station. Every feed. Every private link. All replaced with a synchronized stream of Earth's war archive. There were no menus. No mute button. It began with Sarajevo. Then trenches. Then fire. Officers scrambled. AI systems rerouted. Firewalls held for 6 seconds before failing. They tried to cut power to the simulator room. They failed. The room itself was no longer physical in any comprehensible sense. The simulation had gone live in more ways than intended. The human walked through ruins only he could see. Past ghosts. Past his own species. Past his own blood. And the aliens watching, billions of light years away, across systems and seats of power, watched him walk like he'd done it before. In a way, he had. Because this wasn't a presentation. It was a ritual. The Adraxian linguists collapsed first. Their minds, structured for logical syntax, couldn't process what humans had once chanted before death. "Say goodbye to Mama, your boy's in the mud." The Threxians followed, eyes bleeding. One tried to claw the image from his skull as footage of carpet bombings stitched itself into his vision. "Turn it off," he howled. "Turn the human off." But the human didn't stop. He walked into a trench, lay down, got up, walked into another war, then another. He handed an alien diplomat a piece of debris that had once been a child's shoe. The diplomat ran screaming. In the command center, 2 high-ranking Valari argued over deploying a tactical erase command. Protocol, one barked. Reality, the other hissed. He's not broadcasting. He's remembering. Even the AI began to fold in on itself. One of the simulacra whispered back to the operators. The human is not inside the simulation. The simulation is inside the human. And still he moved. City to city. Language to language. Footage became first person. They saw through his eyes now. Hands trembling on a cigarette stub. The stench of burning rubber and flesh. A brother dying in a stairwell. A woman with half a face whispering, "Hold my baby." He held her. She died. He kept walking. Blood soaked into his socks. Back in the observation deck, the Valari sobbed uncontrollably. She had tried to mock them once, for naming bombs after boys. Now she couldn't breathe when the screen showed the bombs falling. Not on soldiers, on weddings, on children, on hope. One final image, a human boy, maybe 12, holding a rifle longer than his arm, standing over a body, crying and laughing and not knowing which was which. The simulation slowed, froze. The human stood still, breathing hard. Not from exhaustion, from memory. "Why did you show us this?" the AI croaked, its voice now fractured with interference. He turned toward the voice. "Because I was waiting to see if any of you would look away. No one had. That was the problem. They didn't look away. They couldn't. Because something ancient had nested behind his eyes. And when he removed his jacket, they hadn't seen a diplomat. They'd seen what Earth had become to survive itself. And they realized the truth too late. Humans don't fight to conquer. They fight so that the ones who died didn't do so for nothing. One of the Threxians pulled a weapon. Fired. The human dodged without thought. Movement born of instinct, not reflex. He twisted, grabbed, disarmed, elbow to throat, weapon down. One breath. Not elegant. Not stylish. Just effective. Then he picked up the weapon and placed it back on the floor gently, like returning a stolen item to a grave. "Do you understand yet?" he asked. The Valari tried to speak. Failed. Tried again. You've trained for this. All of this. For how long?" His voice didn't change. "We didn't train. We inherited it." Silence. Then one of the younger analysts asked, voice shaking, "What are you?" He didn't answer at first. Then, with a glance at the burning simulations fading behind him, he whispered, "The answer to your question." The lights in the simulator flickered, came back on. He retrieved his jacket, folded it, slid his arms back in, straightened the collar. The war was over. But they weren't. Because in that room, something had shifted. He hadn't shown them human strength. He'd shown them human survival. And the unspoken threat wrapped in velvet. "We learned to bleed and keep walking. Can you?" He walked out barefoot. The floor hissed behind him. A janitorial drone rolled by, chirping, oblivious. Somewhere above, a bureaucrat vomited in a trash chute. He'd seen the simulation, too. One final message broadcast across the station. Not from Earth. From the AI core, before it died. Simulation complete. Survival probability. Human, unknown. Alien coalition, 0.00032%. Recommendation, do not provoke extinction-aware species. The human paused at the exit hatch. "Next time," he said to no one in particular, "bring coffee. We'll talk about Hiroshima." Then he was gone. He requested a meeting. No guards came to summon him. No clearance was given. But somehow, when the Galactic Dominion Council convened in the Prime Chamber, fortified against war, time, and mutiny, he was already there. He stood in the center of the Great Sphere, a glass circle beneath his feet, surrounded by concentric rows of alien leaders. Some sat on bone thrones. Others hovered in vessels of fluid, or flickered in and out of visible spectrum. They had ruled across centuries, broken planets into doctrine, dismantled rebellions with policy. They had never feared one man before, and yet none of them spoke when he entered. He set down a small black box on the chamber floor. Nothing elegant. No lights. No threat. Just a box, 8 inches square. Burned at the corners. A silence unfurled like smoke. The High Chancellor broke it first. "You are unarmed." The human smiled faintly. "That depends what you call arms. Explain the purpose of this intrusion." "I'm not intruding," he said. "I'm finishing." A long pause. Finishing what? He looked up, met the Chancellor's eyes with that terrible stillness that had no echo. The lesson. A ripple moved through the room. The box began to hum. Low. Familiar. Then it clicked. Once. Twice. And then it began to sing. Not in melody. In memory. It emitted no words. Just sound. Screams at first. Human screams. But layered, centuries wide. Children and old men. Women shouting names into the dark. Generations of agony filtered through steel, ash, and drums. One voice rose above the rest. Not a scream. A whisper. We bled to become warnings. Then the footage began. The box projected holograms into the chamber. Not images, but immersions. Each delegate saw something different. A battlefield from their own past. Except now humans were there. Not as conquerors. As witnesses. In each memory, a single human stood at the edge of the carnage, silent, eyes wide. Watching. Writing it down. "What is this?" demanded the Valari ambassador, clutching her temples. The human replied softly, "Your wars." Through our memory. They tried to shut it off. There was no mechanism. The cube ran on remembrance. An Adraxian scholar began speaking in tongues, his voice overlapping itself. They remember everything. Every burn, every name, it hurts. Yes, the human said. That's how it becomes history. One of the Threxian lords lunged for the box. The moment he touched it, his mind was flooded with the image of a city bombed into silence. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Dresden, Aleppo. All of them. All at once. He fell trembling. The Valari wept openly now. Her skin flickered colors, not in her species' known spectrum. She screamed a word that had no translation but meant roughly, undo. The human tilted his head. "We tried that," he said. "Didn't work." The holograms shifted. Now it was music. A record player in a bunker. A piano played for an audience of corpses. Bagpipes on a field soaked in blood. A harmonica beside a trench as frostbitten men carved poetry into their helmets. And under it all, the heartbeat. A singular, relentless human heartbeat. Pounding. Pounding. Then stillness. The lights in the chamber dimmed. The floor beneath the human glowed, and from it rose an image unlike the rest. It was a mirror, framed in twisted shell casings. Smudged. Cracked. It reflected each alien's face. But in their eyes, they saw themselves as humans would have seen them. Not conquerors. Not rulers. Just ghosts waiting for someone to bury them properly. The Chancellor rose. His voice trembled. "You've made your point. What do you want?" The human stepped closer to the cube. "I want nothing." "Then why show us this?" "Because," he said gently, "you keep asking whether humans are dangerous." He looked at the mirror. "You never asked what made us that way." Another silence fell. Longer. Deeper. There were no keystrokes. No protocol. No language safe enough to resume normalcy. He picked up the cube. Walked to the Chancellor. Held it out. The old creature flinched, but did not move. "Take it," the human said. "What is it?" "Your wars. Remembered by us." The Chancellor refused. "That's the difference," the human said. "We always carried the shame." He placed the cube at the foot of the Chancellor's dais. Behind him, the stars outside the station flickered, solar winds dancing across the void. The human turned, began walking to the exit. Someone called out, maybe a voice from one of the lower rings. "What are you?" He paused, looked over his shoulder. "After Auschwitz, we made vows. After Rwanda, we said never again. After every mass grave, we repeated promises with our mouths while our hands kept digging." He turned his full body now, voice quieter. "We are what happens when those who survive never forget." He placed one hand on the doorway, hesitated, then said, almost gently, "You wanted a species you could study. You got a species that studies you back." And then he was gone. No escort, no trail. Just the smell of something ancient, ash, salt, grief, and the echo of boots on steel. For a long time, no one spoke. Then the box began playing one final sound. It was not war. It was not screams. It was a child's voice, soft, unbroken, saying a name over and over in the dark. "Papa? Papa? Papa." The Valari collapsed. The Chancellor bowed his head. The Threxian who had touched the box whispered, "They weaponized memory." No one denied it, because in the end, the human had never fired a shot. He didn't threaten, negotiate, or deceive. He simply held up a mirror and let the Empire see itself through the eyes of a species that had learned, long ago, how to remember its own monsters. The stars outside seemed dimmer now, and somewhere far below, in a data archive that would never again be opened, the human's footsteps faded into a silence deeper than fear. They would never find him again. But the mirror stayed. And it always showed the same thing. Not a human. A warning.